Hey everyone, this is Dom here with a quick video on the ketogenic diet. If you're on YouTube right now, make sure you take a look at my accompanying blog post at 10minutetakeaways.com, my website. That's the number 10. So that'll have a lot more information about the summary of 4 weeks of trying out the ketogenic diet, observations, strategies, tips. So what I did to follow the ketogenic diet, I did a little bit of research initially, listed some resources on my website to take a look at. But basically, the ketogenic diet requires high fat, moderate protein, and very low carbohydrate intake. So I made a plan to experiment with. So for ketogenic diet, the main part of it is getting your body into ketosis, which means primarily your body's going to be using blood ketones for your energy source, as opposed to blood glucose, blood sugar. So your body is still going to produce a certain amount of blood sugar that's necessary for survival, or else you would have hypoglycemia. And additionally, your brain, parts of your brain only can use blood glucose. So it doesn't mean you exclusively use fat for fuel, but your body adapts to using it, as opposed to almost exclusively blood glucose. So that's why the macronutrient ratio, fat, protein, carbs, is a lot different on keto diet. So parameters I set up for myself. I set the initial target of 20 grams of total carbohydrates, and then 80 to 90 grams of protein. And I used zero point 0.8 pounds, zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight as a calculation. There's a lot of different ways you can do calculation. Some people doing keto would say what I did might be a little bit too high. I thought it was okay personally based on my exercise level, so that was my choice. There's a lot of different ways folks can go about it, but the idea of keeping protein moderate is if you're overeating protein, your body can convert it into sugar via a process called gluconeogenesis, which I linked off the introduction blog post. So protein is essential for metabolic and cellular functions. But if you're consuming more protein than is necessary to complete those functions, that's when the excess may be converted into sugar. So throughout the program, I I didn't find it to be overly challenging personally. And what I wanted to make sure to emphasize in the blog post is that for me, I had a 2 month period of adaptation. So when you're shifting your body's fuel source, from primarily glucose to primarily fat, there's going to be an adjustment period. So that can be challenging if you go from eating as kind of a standard American diet with processed food, a lot of grains, bread, pasta, rice, etc. Your body's going to be accustomed to having that as a fuel source. And then if you shift it to 70-75% of your calories coming from fat, your body is accustomed to that glucose pathway. So it's going to give you some signals, some hunger cravings, that's what it's going to prefer. So that's what you would call the adaptation period. So for me, I did a Whole 30 and I did anti-inflammatory diet plan, which I blogged about, and that involved not having any grain, no added sugar, no alcohol for 2 months. So for me to make the shift to trying to hit 20 grams per day of carbs as a target was not completely unreasonable, and I didn't have as challenging of an adjustment period as I would have if I just jumped in with both feet. And I even did a bit of an adaptation period before starting Whole 30 because I knew that was going to be challenging. So I experimented with cutting certain things out prior to getting into a 30-day program. So just a word on, if anyone's interested in trying out keto, there's definitely an adjustment to be made. I wrote about this on my blog, thinking about exercise as well. If you haven't done a certain type of exercise like running in a very long time, and you decide you want to train for a road race, and the first thing you do is hop off your couch and go run 10 kilometers as fast as you can, you might be able to train for a road race that way, but more likely you're going to be stiff, sore, tired, and unmotivated the next day, as opposed to if you gradually build up your workload, monitor how your body's feeling, and approach it that way. So same thing, if you're giving your body a different fuel source to work off of, there's going to be an adjustment period and you want to be mindful of that. If you want to be successful, it's more likely if you give yourself an adjustment period. So I gave the example, do an inventory, give yourself a food journal for a week of what you currently eat and be honest about it. And then try to identify low hanging fruit, so to speak. So if you drink beverages with sugar in it, if you put sugar in your coffee, if you have soda, try a week of cutting those out and substituting in water, black coffee, green tea, seltzer, something with absolutely no sugar, see how that goes, and then build from there. Getting added sugar out of your diet is going to be critical if you want to try out keto, because you're going to be getting rid of those rapid spikes in blood sugar that can trigger those cravings that make the adaptation more challenging. So, some before and after stats for me, you can see in the blog post. Um, I didn't really lose any weight, and I'm not totally surprised about that because of the 2 month period prior. I did lose a little bit of weight, and the goal of what I've been doing, and in particular, it's important to note the goal of keto is not to lose weight. It's not a weight loss diet. It's a diet intended to help you switch over your fuel source. If you do have some weight to lose, that will happen if you're following the ketogenic diet, most likely. So one of the things that's a nice feature that I enjoyed is you do have to count macronutrients, but if you're following the plan correctly, you don't have to count calories. Um, the idea being, if you're eating whole, real food sources and you're eating a high percentage of fat in your diet, it's going to naturally make you feel full or satiated, and you'll be able to listen to your hunger signals and you'll be able to eat when you're hungry. And you'll find probably that's not as frequently as when you're eating a more high carbohydrate diet. So that was a good feature for me. Like I said, I did take some stats, so didn't lose very much weight. Wasn't really surprised by that. My exercise was good throughout. I did make some gains in my exercise, which I was happy about. One of the most notable gains or differences is I do a weekly jog, and I've been doing the same loop throughout my exercise program, so I can see, did I improve my time at all? I noticed when I first started off keto, I had a big improvement from the week prior. I think I cut like 3 minutes off my time. Yeah, about 3 minutes. It was actually, I think, my last week of anti-inflammatory. I was starting to do a little bit of keto, so I cut 3 minutes off my time, and I felt like, wow, that made a big difference. Potentially starting to use that fat for fuel for the long, sustained aerobic exercise. So then I said, okay, well, let me try to push my pace a little bit and see how that goes. And I noticed that there's a hill with about a mile to go in my run, just a gradual incline, and I was having a challenge pushing the pace early on doing keto. And when I started to look at the information, I realized, okay, well, going up a hill may start to shift into that mode where you require some glycogen, some stored carbohydrates for your fuel. And if I'm not eating as many carbohydrates, maybe I don't have that as readily available. So at that point, I moved my target from 20 to 30 grams of carbs per day, and sometimes actually even went over a little bit. I think one of the days I was counting, I had 40 grams the day before my run. And I noticed after that point, I still felt like I could sustain my energy throughout the run. But when I got to the hill, I could cruise up the hill, feel good, and then still feel good after, and was able to cruise through the end of my run. So that was just, again, I'm making guesses. I improved the run almost 4 minutes throughout the course of the keto diet. Some of that's probably a function in getting in better shape, but I do think experimenting with the different fuel sources was also part of that as well. So, looking at the blog post, um, top tips I've got on there as far as like if you wanted to try out keto, what are some high points? The food journal definitely sticks out as a big one. Food journal and meal prep. Um, if you look at challenges, I think the adaptation period is a big challenge for most people. It wasn't so much for me, but I spent over 2 months on it, so there's a big difference there between that and starting cold. Um, the adjustment, so adaptation, adjustment, it can really vary. Um, I think another challenge is getting over the stigma of eating high fat. So making sure to do some research and understanding the science behind um, what's the difference between a whole food fat source versus a processed vegetable oil, and why it's keto would emphasize really the real whole food fat sources, and that would kind of naturally get your omega 3 to 6 ratio in better balance. That can be a challenge. So stigma related to eating fat. Um, that yeah, it can be a lot of challenges, but those were the main ones that came to mind. Everyone's experience is going to be different. So another thing, important thing to emphasize, if you're truly looking to try out ketogenic diet, the only way to really know if your body is in ketosis is to measure. So you can get various devices that will measure your ketone level. So you can get a device that measures your blood. You can get strips that measure urine. I believe there's a breath analysis as well. I didn't take it to that level. So I'm guessing that I was in ketosis based on how I felt and what I was eating, but the only way to really know is if you test ketone levels. So if I was attempting to use ketosis therapeutically for some sort of condition, I would have measured. But that's important to emphasize. Like anything I'm writing about is purely an educated guess based on how I'm feeling. So that's something to emphasize as well about trying out a keto diet. Meals, I was able to play around with a little bit, put up some recipes. I didn't do as much cooking. The primary thing that I made for myself, I did some egg dishes, but I made a coleslaw every week and made that part of my meal. So had some tips on there about how to make a nice high fat coleslaw. So that was keto. It was helpful. I think it was a nice experiment. I think I'll take pieces of it and apply them going forward. I'm definitely looking forward to not counting my macronutrients. Um, it's helpful to do once in a while, but as a daily practice, it's challenging. It's worth doing if you're first starting off something. But my ultimate goal is to find a way of eating where I can basically eyeball it, for lack of a better word. So that's what I'm looking forward to doing. I'll have some information as we come into the holiday season about tips and tricks for success there. Thanks for checking this out. We'll see you next time.